Planting into deep mulch, deep arborist chip, wood chip, bark chip mulch is a little bit different from planting out into the landscape normally, so I'm going to show you how to do that properly. The first step is to move the mulch away, clear the area, and do a pretty good job to not mix any of the soil up with the mulch. You know, a few mulch pieces here and there is not a big deal, but we don't want any mixing. The clear space should be slightly larger in diameter than the planting hole you need. This is so mulch does not tumble down into the hole as you plant. I definitely do not recommend planting into an area that is mulched with cardboard because cardboard smothers. So this cardboard is doing its job smothering out the weeds in this area. There aren't too many in general, but there's just a little bit of this overlap. So to prevent our new baby plant from being smothered out by this cardboard, I'm just making sure that there's a pretty good area around where the plant will be that's free of this cardboard. Probably the most important part of this whole process is to not mix the soil and the mulch. A tiny bit is okay, but this is for two reasons. First, we do not want to get soil in the mulch. Soil just naturally contains weed seeds. So if you get soil on top of your mulch, they're going to sprout. You are going to get weeds. Second, we don't want to mix mulch into the soil. We don't want mulch to be mixed up in the planting hole below the plant. It is a myth that mulch binds up all of the nitrogen in your soil. Mulch, properly placed on the soil surface, does not bind nitrogen, but it does bind a little bit on the soil surface, just around where the mulch is touching the soil, where the mulch is decomposing. But if you were to mix your mulch into the soil, it would then be binding nitrogen up all around itself, and this could affect the plant growth. So just during this part of the decomposition process, mulch does bind nitrogen, but then as mulch decomposes, it later turns into soil and then actually adds nitrogen to the soil, which is pretty cool. But the key takeaway here is to not mix the mulch into the soil in your planting hole when you want your plants to have that nitrogen. So I mentioned the first step is to clear away the mulch from the area as well as you can, relocating wildlife. And then I'm going to use whatever container you would like to use to collect soil. In this case, I'm using an old flower pot. Again, you do not want to mix the mulch and the soil up, so we're going to work hard to keep that separate. So in this case, I'm just digging a hole that's slightly bigger than the plant, the root system of the plant that I'm putting in. And I just want to make sure that there's no major compaction, no large rocks that are going to be right below this new plant. So it has all the space it needs to get started. Now, if you have poor soil, you might choose to amend the planting hole with compost or something else. In this case, because I know that the soil here is really rocky, I'm going to add just a little bit of extra soil from another project to kind of raise up the plant. Step 3 is to plant it level with the mulch. And this can require some adjusting depending on the soil you're working with. If you are adding a little bit of compost to the planting hole, now is a really good time. This isn't always necessary and can be, and just be sure to be careful with nitrogen-rich compost because there is a such thing as too much. Many plants are happy to grow just in native soils, especially native plants, because that's their thing. But sometimes it is nice to give things a little bit of a boost, and a small shovelful of compost is generally a pretty safe amount. And now we will plant our plant. So I like to hold the plant upside down over the planting hole like so when I pull it out of the pot, so any soil that kind of falls away can then be a part of the planting hole and sort of help bridge the transition. You know, it's used to the soil in the pot right now, and then it'll adjust to the native soil. So sometimes I feel like I'm spoiling the plant a little bit, helping it transition by mixing that soil in. So you'll notice here we have some roots that are getting a little bit tangled up at the bottom. They hit the bottom of the pot and they sort of spiral around. In this case, sometimes they'll spiral around up here. If that's the case, sometimes I'll take, I'll try to use my needle nose pruners or just my hands to untangle the roots a little bit. If it's really bad, I'll take the needle nose pruners and I'll kind of slice up and down. In this case, things are pretty good. I am going to try to untangle this just a little bit, very gently. At this point, this is pretty dry. This plant should be a little bit, we probably should have watered it before I started this process, but that's okay. But it doesn't always have to be perfect. Plants can tolerate a range of conditions. We do our best to spoil them within the context of what we can handle on a given day, balancing that with efficiency. When you're planting in mulch, the planting level is really important because we do not want to bury the stem in mulch. That'll suffocate, that'll smother out the plant. So what we want to have happen is we want the mulch to taper down to the base of the plant. So whether this is something with a trunk like this coyote bush, or more of an herbaceous perennial, something with a lot of stems, we want the level of the wood chip mulch to be a match with the level, the planting level here. So I really will taper the mulch down a little bit, but we want to make sure that there's enough soil in this planting hole a big chunk. We want to make sure there's enough soil in the planting hole that it's planted at the correct level. And if you have long roots like this, it can be good to let them get started a little bit deeper. So you'll notice I kind of opened the soil up, lowered the first roots into it, and then started filling the soil in as I lower the plant into the space. So I think this will need to be just a little bit lower. So I'm going to put some of this nicest soil right around the root system, and then the slightly poorer soil around the edges, and it'll act sort of as a transition. Again, this is perhaps a little overkill. I'm spoiling the plant a little bit, but why not? So I like to put just a little pressure around the plant as I'm putting it in so it's snug. I like to think dense chocolate cake, but we don't want to pack it into clay pottery. Now at this point, you'll notice that the mulch level is a little bit higher than the soil level. Something I like to do is create just a little circular mound in the soil, like so, around the plant, because even once we put the mulch on top, the shape of this soil, it's like a donut essentially, a little trench all the way around the plant. This will create a little space for water to fill in and catch. So once the mulch is covering things up, you come in here with maybe you're dumping a bucket of water, maybe this is being hit by a sprinkler. Regardless, it'll kind of, it'll send the water toward the roots of the plant. It'll fill in here and then slowly permeate down. If we had just a mound that was at an angle like this, that water's going to be sent. Even that slight of a difference is going to send some of that water a little bit further away from the plant. So this can make watering just a little bit easier, give your plants a boost. That's one of my favorite planting tricks. It makes a really big difference in my experience. Before we talk about mulch, I have some exciting news. When I was a kid, I would constantly collect and press flowers in the pages of an old phone book. A friend recently inspired me to try this again, and I was happy to find a class about this on Skillshare, who I'm excited to announce is the sponsor of today's video. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives. There are thousands of classes led by industry experts. Art, cooking, productivity, business, and so much more. You can find classes by category, a specific software or material, or follow a learning path. Curated sequential classes that guide you through the process of mastering a new skill. I'm using Skillshare to learn more about video editing as I grow Garden Project Academy here. It was also so much fun to take some time to do this project and play and create something out of flowers. I learned that you can press flowers almost instantly using an iron. I had no idea. So if you'd like to learn a new skill this fall or explore a new topic, the first 500 people to use the link in my description will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare. Get started today. Thank you, and thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this channel so I can keep on making videos about plants and how we can make the world a better place through what we do in our backyards. So now let's bring some of this mulch back in. And I feel like this spot could be mulched a little bit deeper too. So you'll notice that I'm trying to keep the mulch at the same depth that it was originally, all the way around, except for right around the base of the plant. So I'm just basically not mulching, and maybe 2 inches in diameter around the base of the plant, around the trunk, around the stem. Do not bury the stem. It does not matter if you have a tree, you have an herbaceous perennial with a cluster of stems, or you have a tiny matting ground cover. If you bury the base of that plant, that will be bad news. So be sure to taper the mulch down to the plant. And a few pieces of mulch touching the stem, that's okay, but nothing pushing up against or burying that stem in any way. We want to keep the mulch at the same level that it was at everywhere else in the landscape, typically about 2 inches minimum, somewhere around 2 to 3 inches. There is a such thing as too much mulch around the base of a plant. A good layer of mulch is at least 2 inches deep, but I've planted plants like this into areas with, 4 inches of mulch, for example. If you add a little bit of soil to the planting hole, you can taper the plant up so it's almost up on a little bit of a mound underneath the mulch, and the mulch will essentially be at the same level on the surface, but underneath the ground there's a little bit of soil, like the plant's up on a mound. And you can even still put a little bit of a, that donut trench of water situation around the plant. All of that happening underneath the mulch, even in areas that are really deeply mulched. Even if you have a really small plant that's going into really deep mulch, again, it can be helpful to bring in a little bit of soil, maybe from another part of your project site, so that you can create a little mound that's happening underneath the mulch, an invisible mound, to bring that plant up to the proper level. As you plant it in mulch, make sure you don't mix anything up. And this will be a happy plant. And simple as that. Don't bury your gardening tools. And finally, don't forget to water your plant. This is the final magical step. This water will help settle the soil into place, and it'll give the plant the moisture that it needs to start growing, to adjust to its new home. So once again, here are the steps. Clear the mulch away from the area. Do not mix soil and mulch together. Put the plant level with the mulch so that it has a little bit of mulch covering the roots, but not too much. We don't want any more than about 2 inches. Taper the mulch and do not bury the stem. And if you're new here, hi and welcome to Garden Project Academy. I create online courses, resources to help you have a more successful garden project. You might be interested in a free mini course, How to Choose the Perfect Plant, that's linked below. It's all about the things you need to research to determine that you are putting the right plant in the right place in your yard. So if you've always wondered, what's a good checklist of the things that you need to consider before selecting a plant for a certain space in your yard, in your landscape, check out that resource below. Again, free mini course. I hope it helps you. Thanks for watching and happy planting.